one of the very few surviving fruit farms in Cambridgeshire. We're in the village of Melrith. Melbourn and Melrith, the two villages, were at one time very significant fruit growing areas. The family's been in the fruit business for at least 5 generations. Started around about the 1860s, 1870s. My father persevered, and somehow we've sort of come through some rough times, and we've survived. We've got 4 orchard sites. One of them, the biggest orchard, is at Grinnell Hill outside Melbourne. It's 28 acres, and it's a mixture of apples and plums. The second orchard, Carton Hill Orchard, New Road, Melbourne, 14 acres, and that is all plums. And then we've got the Heritage Orchard in Meldreth at the end of Chiswick End. That's 9 acres, and that is all apples. And then we've got a small area just behind the farm shop, and there's about half an acre there, a few pears and a few brambles. It's main season pruning really for plums. This is the perfect time of year for pruning plums. They should be done any time from beginning of April to the end of May. There's been heavy blossom and perfect conditions for pollination. The chances are we're going to have a heavy set, so that dictates really just how much pruning we do. And this year, because conditions have been very good, we're taking quite a lot of thinning out. If you left Victoria plums to their own devices, they could crop 15 tonne to the acre, but the quality of the fruit would be very poor, and you wouldn't be able to sell it for very good money. So you're not really looking to maximise yields, you're more looking to maximise quality as opposed to maximise yield. So what we are trying to achieve is a 7-tonne crop, basically. 7 tonne to the acre crop. We are a very traditional fruit farm. We're not very modern in respect of both the varieties we're growing and the planting distances. The more modern systems have got 10 times the tree populations. They've got a post and wire system. What's called the fruit wall system is the most modern type of growing system. And yeah, we're very far removed from that. We just don't have the right soil for intensive production.
I like farming, that's what I enjoy doing. My family own a farm in Kent near Canterbury. That's different to this one, but I worked on there when I was younger. That's where I learned to drive tractors and things like that, so it is in the family.
Over the years, these trees have got too heavy in the top of the tree, basically. So we're going through just trying to take some heavy wood out of the tops to make them more accessible. In this area, it was more plum growing, in particular Cambridge gauges. They were the #1 variety really planted in Melbourne and Meldreth. 60 years ago, there were about 30 fruit growers in the two villages. Some of them only part-time, but 30 that actually earned their living or part of their living from orchard fruit. 20 years ago, there were still 1,500 acres of plums grown, and that's just South Cambridgeshire. But that's virtually all disappeared. Well, we are the remnants, really, of B8 Palmer Limited, which were one of the bigger Melbourne growers. When I was a kid, they had about 12 orchards in the villages of Melbourne and Meldreth, of which we we are now running the only, well, 4 of them, which are the only commercial orchards left really in the village. And it was my grandmother's generation. My grandmother was one of the palmers. It was her generation really that expanded the business. So it was Bertram's 2 sons, in other words, Jack and Jim Palmer. I suppose through the 1920s into the 1960s, or early 60s. That was the sort of period of expansion. And then from the late 60s onwards, that's when the decline started really, and they started grubbing up the orchards. And by, I should think, the mid-80s, Jack Palmer retired, and the few orchards that he had, he was still running himself. That's when they went by the wayside. Kingsway Orchard was the biggest one, and that's now a golf course. Elbourn side of the family, they married into the Palmers. That's how we got involved in fruit growing, but really they'd been farming for generations themselves. Mostly cereals, mostly arable farming. My grandfather had a haulage business. My great-grandfather was an agricultural contractor, so he had traction engines, threshing machines, that sort of thing. My father started grubbing orchards in the 1970s, probably between 78 and 85, half the acreage had gone. My father just refused to give up fruit growing. It wasn't really very economical in the 80s in particular, 80s and 90s. That's when the glut hit the market, when the market was particularly oversupplied. But the only reason we kept going, to be honest, was because of the farm shop. But in recent years things have got a lot better. People have started looking for locally grown fruit, so there's the wholesale market is sort of locally has picked up quite a lot. At one time an apple was an apple and people didn't really care where it came from. 20 years ago, if you had told me that people would be looking specifically for fruit that was grown on their doorstep, I wouldn't really have believed you. But, that's the way things have turned out. I'm trying to keep ahead of Dan, so that when he catches up with me, I've just timed it, so I've finished the orchard. Very soon after we've finished pruning, we get a crew in to thin to pull off the surplus fruit.
Well, we've been producing cider for 7 or 8 years, I think, and we're always experimenting with different varieties of apples as we grow such a range of apples. We've got potential for producing some quite different tasting ciders, some of them more successful than others, and so we like to get a bit of feedback really from our customers to see, really what we could be producing in the future. We're always looking at what other varieties we can use and what blends to go for. So it was good from that point of view to invite customers in that we've been buying cider from us over the years. Yeah, it did go well. Yeah, some people were rather reluctant to go home, but yeah, it was a good event.